With me, Mr. A.
And me, Mr. S.
We're not singing anymore.
I kind of sang and then stopped.
Oh.
So what are we doing today in English?
Well, we're going to look at something called speech. Well, every day when you're having a conversation with someone, we know what somebody's saying because their mouth is moving and we know it's coming from that character. But when we open a book, like this, you've got, obviously, the narrator who's telling the story, but you also might have characters in here. And these characters, say Oliver Twist, might actually say something. And the difficulty is when you're reading a book, you need to know, well, was that the narrator saying that? Or was that the character saying that? And then the character might be talking to someone else who might reply, and it's like, well, did the character say that? Or did the other person say that? And was that a reply? Well, you need to make it clear who is saying what. And that is when we're going to look at something called speech marks.
So, if we have a look at this sentence here, you will see that it contains some speech, but at the moment, there aren't any speech marks, so it's not immediately obvious the words that are being said and the words that aren't being spoken out loud.
He said, when are we going back to school? Well, I think...
It's a question on everyone's lips at the moment,
It
isn't
is. I think, from even just looking at that, without the punctuation at the moment, I can figure out where the speech will go. So if I can figure out this one, then I can start using the rules from this one to apply to other sentences. So, the big clue in this sentence has to be that word, said. He said. Now, when I speak, I don't have to say, Mr. A said. It's very obvious who's doing that. But the words that come out of my mouth are what I say. So I'm assuming the words that have come out of his mouth are, when are we going back to school? So what I need to do here is I need to use my speech marks around the exact words that are spoken, the very words that would come out of the person's lips.
Now, I've heard another word or phrase for speech marks. I've heard of something called inverted commas. Are they the same thing?
Exactly the same thing. Some teachers might call them inverted commas, some teachers might call them speech marks. There's probably a third name out there somewhere, and if you know what it is, comment down below.
Eustace.
I don't think they're called Eustace.
Okay, just trying.
So, we use two of these, and they come in pairs already, but we use two pairs of speech marks around what is said. Now, I already mentioned, he hasn't said the words he said. That's just to prepare us as the reader. So I put it after that, next to where it says when, so just before then, because that's the first word he's going to say. And coming to the end, I include the question mark inside my speech mark.
Very important, isn't it, that?
Because that is part of what he said. That was the question that came out of his mouth. So the question mark goes inside my final set of speech marks. But just because I've now put my speech marks around what was said doesn't mean I'm finished. There is one more piece of punctuation today. It's very important when we're putting speech marks around the spoken words. Do you know what it is?
No, tell me.
I do all the work around here. It is a comma. And a comma works a little bit like it did in a subordinate clause or a fronted adverbial, one of those openers, in that we need to break up the speaker from the speech to make it even more clear to the reader that this is a different part of the text here. This is the speaker and this is the actual speech. We separate it with a comma. It's kind of like a bouncer keeping them apart. So, he said, that must be our speaker, and we've already got our speech with our speech marks. So we're going to put a comma just in between them like that. Nice and simple. But when we're writing, the speech doesn't always come after the speaker. Sometimes it might look a little bit like this.
I'm very hungry, John shouted. Well, first of all, we haven't got the word said there because there are lots and lots. Said's a bit boring, isn't it? And thankfully, there are lots and lots and lots of synonyms for the word said. So whenever you're writing and you include some speech, it's a good idea to try and mix it up a little bit and don't just always use the word, stop that. Don't just always use the word said because it is a bit dull, isn't it?
Yeah. So, let's first of all try and figure out what was actually said or shouted or spoken in this sentence. I'm very hungry, shouted John. Well, I think what's been said is the part about being hungry. So I'm going to put my speech marks around those exact words that were spoken. So it goes before I'm, and it comes after hungry. Because he definitely didn't say, shouted John.
That would be silly. No one would do that, would they? Said Mr. S. Oh, no.
No one would do that.
Ignore me.
Only Mr. S would do that. Now, we've got our speech. We need that comma now to separate the speaker from the speech. Well, we know where our speech is, and John is our speaker, so let's separate that with a lovely comma. And we always need a full stop at the end of this one to show that this sentence in our book has come to an end. Now, quickly before we stop, some of you are probably saying, but wait there.
Hold on.
I think for that sentence, he's shouting it. So I think we could end what he's actually said with a different piece of punctuation. Mr. S.
Yep, because he's shouting it, he's exclaiming. We could use an exclamation mark. So where you can see that comma, we can get rid of that comma and put in an exclamation mark. And the same rule would apply if somebody was asking a question. You put the speech marks at the start of their question, then a question mark at the end of their question, then a closing set of speech marks, and then you could say something like asked Sally or something like that.
The important thing to remember is if you substitute that comma for an exclamation mark or a question mark, that you make sure there is some piece of punctuation there to finish the sentence that has been spoken by the character. But you've got to be discerning as to which one you use. Have a go on the task below at getting the punctuation in the right places, and don't forget, you're needing 2 pieces of punctuation today: speech marks or inverted commas and a normal comma. Off we go.